A young black girl in a navy blue coverall stands beneath the hood of a car, her hands steady, her brow furrowed in quiet concentration. Her name tag reads Imani, but none of the boys snickering behind her bothered to read it. They're too busy exchanging glances in their polished gray blazers, the kind that match their entitlement. One of them scoffs, loud enough to be heard but soft enough to feign innocence. Why get dirty when you could just ride in one? The others laugh. Imani doesn't. She keeps working, each turn of the wrench sharper, more precise, as if their voices are nothing but background noise, because they don't know what she knows. They don't know who's about to walk in. Outside, the low purr of a Rolls-Royce engine slices through the silence. Her father has arrived, not to rescue her, but to reveal exactly what legacy looks like when it's built with calloused hands and quiet fire. What happens next turns mockery into awe, and makes it clear that greatness isn't worn, it's earned. Before we begin, have you ever been underestimated for doing something with your hands instead of wearing a title? Drop your country below. Imani Blake was unlike anyone else in that room. 16 years old with a calm presence that didn't ask for attention. It earned it, quietly. Her fingers moved confidently across the engine, the scent of oil and steel, more familiar to her than the perfumes worn by most girls her age. She didn't wear her father's name like a badge. She wore his work ethic. She didn't crave the spotlight. Instead, she preferred the comforting rattle of a socket wrench to the chatter of popularity. But even here, in this elite private academy's prestigious automotive program, her silence was mistaken for weakness. The other students didn't know her. They only saw her coveralls, her skin, her quiet, and they drew their own conclusions. Preston and his circle were the sons of men who bought status, not built it. Dressed in tailored blazers with school crests stitched over their hearts, they watched Imani like she didn't belong. To them, the idea of a girl, especially a black girl, under the hood of a car was amusing, not impressive. They whispered about her hands, her posture, her silence. Raised on comfort, they had no frame of reference for what she was made of. Their conflict wasn't with her, they just couldn't imagine someone strong without a title, someone powerful without shouting. Across the city, Malcolm Blake remembered exactly what that felt like. Once a young black man elbow-deep in grease, he had turned a small garage into a billion-dollar auto tech empire. Now, he wore suits custom-cut to fit his rise, but never let them cut off his roots. He told his daughter early on, "Respect is earned twice when you build with your hands." Malcolm never forgot who he was, and he made sure Imani knew where she came from, even as she grew up in boardrooms and Bentleys. The workshop at the academy gleamed like a showroom. Chrome tools lined the walls, the floors were polished enough to reflect faces, and at the far end sat a showroom Rolls-Royce, placed there to inspire the students. Ironically, no one knew it had been donated by the very man who once fixed them, now owned them. Imani didn't need that car to prove her place. Her proof was in her precision. As she wiped sweat from her temple, she whispered words her father, taught her. My father didn't build his name with clean hands, he built it with honest ones. And while Preston and the others chuckled nearby, she knew something they didn't, that greatness has a humbler engine than most people realize. Imani had always known walking into that workshop would feel like stepping into a storm. At her elite private academy, the automotive elective was mostly a playground for the sons of executives, a break from academics where they could tinker and pose beside cars they'd never fix. Girls rarely signed up. A black girl, unheard of. But Imani didn't walk in to prove a point. She walked in because she belonged there. Still, from the moment she zipped up her coveralls, the tension clung to the air like grease on metal. Preston and his pack of well-groomed boys clocked her, presents with side-eyes and stifled laughs. They didn't say much at first, but their mockery grew louder with each day she didn't shrink. By the end of the week, the jokes turned public. "Girls like you don't belong under hoods," one of them said with a crooked grin, loud enough for everyone to hear, but soft enough to deny if called out. The others snickered. Imani didn't respond. She tightened a bolt, moved on to the next task. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was steel, but they mistook it for submission. So they escalated. One day she arrived to find her tools missing. Another, her project engine had been tampered with, small components removed to set her back. She said nothing. She simply rolled up her sleeves and fixed what they thought would break her. There were no tears, no complaints, just the quiet clinking of a socket wrench that echoed louder than any insult. The final straw came during a lunch break. Preston, phone in hand, filmed her wiping grease from her palms. "Caught the janitor's kid fixing Daddy's car," he whispered to the camera, then laughed as he hit record. She heard it. She didn't flinch. Instead, she picked up her wrench, turned her back, and adjusted the timing belt like her future depended on it. Because it did. And then, like a line drawn across a page, the atmosphere shifted. From outside the garage bay, the sound of an engine purred. Low, smooth, unmistakably powerful. It wasn't just any engine. It was a Rolls-Royce, the kind that didn't just arrive, it announced. Heads turned, phones lowered, jokes died mid-sentence. Imani didn't need to look. She already knew what they were about to learn. The garage bay doors rolled open with a soft mechanical hiss, and in glided a royal blue Rolls-Royce, its engine purring like a whispered warning. The laughter in the workshop evaporated, swallowed by the sudden hush that fell over the room. Every blazer-wearing boy turned toward the car as it came to a stop with surgical precision, headlights glowing under the fluorescent lights. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Malcolm Blake. His presence was magnetic. Tailored suit, polished shoes, a calm authority that didn't need to raise its voice. Preston blinked in disbelief. "That's your car?" he stammered, his smirk now replaced with a creeping awareness. Malcolm gave a small smile, almost amused. "No," he said evenly. "That's just one of them." The weight of those words sank quickly. He walked slowly across the workshop floor, past the wide-eyed students until he reached Imani, still at her station, wiping her hands with a shop towel, calm as ever. He rested a hand gently on her shoulder, not just with affection, but with pride. "I heard there was some serious talent in this class," he said, eyes scanning the room before landing on Preston. "Didn't realize it was coming from my own daughter." The color drained from Preston's face. "We didn't know," he mumbled. Malcolm's gaze didn't soften. "That's the problem," he said. "You saw coveralls and grease and assumed it meant she was less. You saw dirt and thought it couldn't possibly be connected to success. But this," he held up his hand, showing a faint scar from a wrench injury long past. "This is where it started for me. I built Blake Motors under this very same grease. Imani grew up watching me with engines before she learned how to tie her shoes. You think you know what success looks like because you've only ever seen it after the polish. But the truth, he turned to the entire class now. The truth is built with hands like hers, not with hashtags or handouts. The boys stood frozen, their posture slumped, the echo of their own laughter suddenly shameful. Imani said nothing, her eyes steady, beneath the fluorescence. She didn't need to gloat. She had already won. Her presence, unmoved, unshaken, was the real lesson of the day. Malcolm looked at her, his voice warm now. You don't need to say a word, baby girl. Your work did the talking. And in that garage, among all the chrome and clean uniforms, it was suddenly clear. Greatness wasn't in the car. It was in the courage to build one. As the tension thickened in the room, Malcolm Blake's gaze swept slowly across the stunned group of students, their polished shoes suddenly feeling too small for the floor they stood on. He stepped forward, standing beside the Rolls-Royce like it was a monument to quiet resilience, and cleared his throat, not for attention, but for effect. Some of you may not know this, he said, but Blake Motors is the primary sponsor of this very automotive program. A few mouths parted in disbelief. Phones in pockets buzzed with the weight of realization. I didn't build my company for applause. He continued, his voice even and direct. I built it so that kids like my daughter wouldn't have to constantly prove they belong in places they already earned. His words echoed off the garage walls, cutting deeper than any lecture could. Too often, talent is overlooked because it doesn't arrive in a tailored suit. Too often, brilliance is silenced by uniforms that mistake money for merit. As murmurs moved through the room, a new presence entered. Preston's father, a well-dressed man with a company pin on his lapel. Malcolm clocked him immediately and offered a cool, knowing nod. Some of you may also recognize a familiar face, he said. Preston's father here once pitched me for investment in his company. I declined, not because he wasn't capable, but because I didn't invest in titles. I invest in people, in grit, in vision. The boys stiffened. Preston's jaw tightened. Malcolm turned back to Imani, now standing taller than she'd ever felt. His voice softened with pride. She doesn't just belong here. One day, she's going to run this industry, and not because of her last name, but because she knows what every gear, every screw, and every silence means. That moment didn't just flip the room, it rewrote the rules. The same hands they mocked now held a future they could never touch. In the days that followed, the air inside the workshop changed. The smug silence had been replaced with genuine curiosity, and the mocking laughter was long gone. Instead, students leaned in, asked questions, paid attention, not just to Imani, but to the craft. No longer the girl they dismissed, Imani became the one they turned to. When the instructor announced a final project, to rebuild and fine-tune a custom engine, from scratch, it was Imani they asked to lead, not because she was Malcolm Blake's daughter, but because she had proven herself where it mattered, with her hands, her focus, and her unshakable grace. Even Preston, stripped of his pride but not his potential, approached her with humility in his voice. I owe you an apology, he said quietly one morning. I judged you before I even saw what you could do. I was wrong. His eyes held sincerity. I'd be honored if you'd help me understand this build. Imani nodded without hesitation. Engines don't hold grudges, she said with a small smile. They just need the right spark. And so they worked, side by side, not as opponents, but as students learning from one another. 1 week later, Malcolm returned to the workshop. This time, the Rolls-Royce wasn't a symbol of status, but a backdrop to a moment of growth. The students gathered proudly around their rebuilt engine, wires polished, pistons humming smoothly as it fired up for the first time. Imani stood at the front, arms folded across her chest, proud but never boastful. Malcolm looked at the engine, then at his daughter. "This," he said, "is how revolutions begin. Quietly, with people who care more about the work than the praise." Then, reaching into his coat pocket, he pulled out a folded document. "Today," he announced, "I'm establishing a scholarship in Imani's name, one that honors hands-on excellence, leadership, and humility, regardless of what someone looks like or where they come from." A hush fell over the room, followed by soft claps that grew into heartfelt applause. The school board took notice. Within a month, the academy rewrote its student code, recognizing technical trades as equal to academic honors, opening more space for students to explore, build, and lead in ways that reflected more than just social rank. The garage, once a side program, became a centerpiece of the school's mission. On the final day of the term, Malcolm walked back into the shop, where Imani was polishing off the final touches on the engine. She looked up at him with a proud glint in her eye, extended a wrench, and smiled. "You built it," she said, placing it gently in his hand. "Now I'll tune it." Malcolm looked at her, his eyes soft with the kind of pride that no empire could ever replace. And in that moment, surrounded by chrome and memory, father and daughter stood not on the difference between generations, but on the shared foundation of everything they had created together. Sometimes the real power isn't in the car you drive, but in knowing how to build one from nothing. Imani didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight for attention. She just worked, quietly, precisely, with the strength of those who know their worth long before the world does. And when the moment came, she didn't have to say a word. Her father's presence wasn't just a reveal. It was a reminder that true success doesn't always look like a suit and tie. Sometimes it looks like grease-stained hands and unwavering focus. Have you ever been mocked for your passion just because it didn't match someone else's version of success? Would you have stayed quiet like Imani, letting your work speak for itself, or arrived like Malcolm, calm but unforgettable? If this story inspired something in you, share it. Someone out there is building in silence, questioning whether what they love is enough. Remind them it is. Thanks for watching. Until next time, honor the builders and never judge the grease before you know the story.